And it was interesting because then I chased that model, right? Like that mythical, and again, this is a different Grant Cardone back then than the Grant Cardone you see. The Grant Cardone we see now is even like way off, like way more driven, right? The one I saw was just like, wow. I said, that's what I want to look like. I want to be professional. I want to be a suit and tie kind of guy. I want to make, 300 grand a year. And like, this is going to be awesome.
That narcissistic personic ideal was painted for you and you ran at it.
Hello, everybody. I am super excited to have Benny on here. And I stopped him mid-sentence because he has so much to say and we need to get it on the podcast. So, Benny, start where you started.
I was just telling Dr. Doug that I was first introduced to him last year. I was at the EOS conference and Gino Wickman was in a breakout room talking about his 10 disciplines. And that's where you can do a little Q&A with Gino. And so I stood up and I wanted to ask Gino a real thought-provoking question. I wanted to figure out, where does Gino go to get his juice? Like, where is he learning from? I asked him for 3 book recommendations and he said Driven by Dr. Doug Brackmann, and that's why I'm so awesome. It's so awesome to be here. And he also told me about The Untethered Soul, and he told me about Letting Go. Man, so I read those 3 books. I'm in that matrix now of like the woo-woo stuff, and it's really fascinating. It's cool because my wife, Brittany, she's into mindfulness, meditation, yoga. She really helps me with like slowing my brain down a little bit. And when I read your book, the first time I read your book, I was coming back from a silent retreat because I went to the Art of Living Institute in Boone, North Carolina, and did like a full 3 or 4 day silent retreat with her.
You didn't do the 10-day?
No, I didn't do the 10-day. We got steps to this, right? There's steps, So 10 days would be interesting. That would be wild. But I was driving back from North Carolina.
The first retreat I ever did was my dissertation chair said, man, you ought to try some meditation. So 10 days, let's go. And it was the Art of Living, S.N. Goenka, classic Vipassana. It changed my life, man.
Yeah, and it was like a 7 or 8 hour drive back from North Carolina. And that was the perfect amount of time to listen to your audiobook. And I crushed it, man. It was cool to see all the stats and all the science in there. It was a lot for me to comprehend, at once, but I definitely got the gist of it. And then when I met Rachel, I feel like, Rachel, when did we meet? 6 months ago?
I heard you on Tiffany Souter's podcast first. And Tiffany's awesome. Talks about double-driven household, right? When both parents are working. And I heard you, and then I followed your podcast. But what really got me to like reach out to you was you did that solo podcast with yourself, and you shared what you may have not known was then your driven story. And like, I want you to share that here on the podcast because you were talking about your story. And it's like, oh my gosh, like, when a driven meets a driven. And I was like, I see you. And we need to talk and like, we belong. Like you were like, yeah, I'm weird like that, or I'm defective. And I'm like, no, you belong on the island of misfit toys, Yeah.
We've got a very similar story, bro. You know that. I've mentioned that in Driven, but I'm a high school dropout, lived in a car. And I discovered that if you take liquid ether, pump it on top of about 1/4 ounce of cocaine, it turns into water and chlorine gas. And what's left is crystalline pure cocaine. And then if you smoke it, it is the most profound high in the world. From the first exposure of that to a locked psych ward, I lost probably 25 pounds. I was 138 pounds when I went into the nut ward, floridly psychotic, hearing voices and all that. It was like, wow. Profound realization that if I listen to the elephant and follow the impulses in the elephant, my life is done. What's your story?
I was born in 1981, and in the 80s, that was a big time for all the teachers to diagnose all the kids with ADHD. And so like in 1988, I believe I was like 7 years old. I remember always getting in trouble at school. My mom and dad got divorced when I was 5. So my mom was struggling to survive. And just, I had 2 sisters and didn't get paid a lot of attention to, right? At home or at school, I don't think. So the teachers were like, something's wrong with this kid. They had me in like learning disabled classes. It was wild. Because when I think back, I'm like, holy cow.
Man, chapter 1 of Driven, man, there's nothing wrong with you. Difference is good. But that moment of there's really something wrong with me, did you realize or experience that?
Obviously, I don't think I was aware as I am now. now, but like it was definitely awkward. It was misunderstood. I didn't know how to communicate that out properly. I tried to explain it. I tried to get attention. Like I tried to like wave my hands and like cry for help and say like, no, I'm actually smart. Like I'm really smart. Like, and then that kind of got looked back on as like, oh, shut up, kid. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like it just perpetually got worse as I tried to speak up and more for myself. I look back and, maybe then I thought I got, the raw end of the stick, but I don't actually believe the doctors, the teachers, the parents, I don't actually believe they were doing anything like maliciously harmful to me. They were just reacting the only way that they knew how to this like ball of energy that was the 7, 8, 9-year-old little boy. So I remember going to all the testing. I remember you going to a psychologist. They wanted to put me on Ritalin. My mom was very afraid of drugs, and we grew up in a very strict Baptist home. Which that added to like a lot of my issues probably growing up. Some in a good way, some in a not so great way. And then I had this aunt. She was a school teacher. And she was a guidance counselor, not in my school system, but she heard about these things that were happening through my parents. And she said, let me get Benny tested. And she tested me for my IQ, and my IQ was like 132. And then right at the time.
Right, that's normal IQ, right?
I don't know. I just know that it's above 100, right? And like so below 100, I know is when you should be in like, more of the special
Right.
needs. Like you really are learning disabled, like she kind of vouched for me a little bit, but not a ton, right? Because she could only do so much. But yeah, so I struggled, with that. I struggled, like I had friends, I tried to make friends in school, and, some of them would love me, some of them would hate me. So it would be this like hot and cold relationships. I never felt like I had a club I belonged to. Like I was friends with like a little bit of everybody in school, just because I kind of just felt very isolated and very alone.
Yeah, that aloneness, man, that is on a soul level. Lonely is in the body. Alone is in your soul. That's a common thread between all drivens is we have a profound awareness that we're split off from God. Is one way to say it. And most people are, I'm a good guy. Do this. And they have a neurodiverse, non-neurodiverse brain that really, they don't question it. And that questioning alone, what happened with that? Where's that? Because that almost killed me.
I think I was just going so fast and going through everything. Like back, like, up until I got out of high school, I don't really feel like I just was always disappointed. Like I always disappointed my parents. I always felt like, I didn't get good enough grades in school. I disappointed my teachers because they always said, this is my favorite line that I always hated. You have so much potential, Benny. You have so much potential. Yeah, I know, but I just don't want to do the stuff that you want me to do. Like, that's really what it was. Like, I remember I had a teacher, a calculus teacher, that we had like, let's just say 500 points made up the 9-week grading period. 50 points of this was like, you either got the full 50 points if you did your homework every day. And so like, there's 5 days of homework and a 9-week period. So 45 homework days. You can miss 3 days and still get the 50 points. Once you miss that fourth day of homework, you got 0 points. Well, the first quarter, I wasn't that smart. And I ended up missing like 4 or 5 because like, just because I got to the end, I missed 4 or 5, I got a 0. Well, the next quarter, I was like, shoot, if you miss 4, you get 0. If you miss 45, you get 0. I literally didn't do homework the second quarter. And when the teacher would come around, I literally had nothing on my paper. I didn't even try. I said, I'll take the 0. I'll take the 0. I aced every single test. I ended up getting a B. And the teacher, his face would be beet red because all the other kids are watching me. And they think I'm just like, making a scene or being funny. And I guess I kind of was being funny. I just outsmarted the system and I was just like, this is the penalty. I'm not doing 2 or 3 hours of homework every night for 9 weeks to get a A versus a B. Like, I don't really care.
That is the most driven story I've ever heard.
I love it.
It's so classic. If you think about driven, we're designed to live in a pre-agricultural caveman world. And why am I going to spend effort at doing something that doesn't increase my likelihood of survival? Like, that's stupid.
Survival of the fittest,
Well, Well, and I knew that I wasn't really made out for college. Like I knew that deep down inside, but back in the late 90s, all the pressure was go to college. My parents never went to college. So they're like, yeah, you should go to college. They weren't paying for it. They wanted, I had to pay my own way. And I tried, because I was trying to appease everybody else. My parents weren't going to help me with like paperwork to get into college. So like, I had all these other friends. They were getting grants. They were getting scholarships. I'm like, I don't know, like, should I just go to the local community college? And I did. I enrolled. And it was just like high school again. There was like the same lunch table. There was the same kids. And it was just like 2 weeks in, I'm just like, I'm paying actually to be here when I could actually be making money. It's like the reverse effect. I ended up seeing an ad for a car dealership in a newspaper, because that's how we kind of looked for jobs back in like I think 99 and 2000. I said, you could make $100,000 a year. And I'm like, wow, well, that's more than both my parents make. I said, like, this is going to be awesome. And so, but you had to pay $500 to go to car sales training. It was a 2-week training. Back then, imagine this. Imagine if we could do this now. Charge people to come and train at our company. They make it through 2 weeks, and now you have the cream of the crop. And the ones that don't, at least you got $500 for them not making the cut. They ended up giving me my money back. That was part of the thing. If you make it through the 2 weeks, you get your money back. So I was like, well, this $500 invested in this sales training is gonna be much more than this 6 or 10 grand or whatever that college was back then. And so I did that, and then I got in this world of the car dealership, and I got to be surrounded by probably a lot of other driven men, right? Slick back hair, coffee, closers, Grant Cardone style. He was the first influencer I ever met or like wanted to be like in my life. I was 2 years into car sales, and they said, hey, we got this guy, this guru coming up to Cleveland. I was from Canton, Ohio. He's coming up to Cleveland. It's $300 for a ticket. We strongly recommend that you go and you pay your own way. And I went up there, and this is before social media, right? And this guy comes in, Grant Cardone. I think at the time he had to be, I know he's 20 years older than me, so he was probably 40. I was probably 20. He had the suit on, he had the Rolex, the good looks, man. I was like, dude, that's the guy I want to be like when I grew up. And it was interesting because then I chased that model, right? Like that mythical, and again, this is a different Grant Cardone back then than the Grant Cardone you see. The Grant Cardone we see now is even like way off, like way more driven, right? The one I saw was just like, wow. I said, that's what I want to look like. I want to be professional. I want to be a suit and tie kind of guy. I want to make, 300 grand a year. And like, this is going to be awesome.
That narcissistic personic ideal was painted for you, and you ran at it.
That was the only thing I had in my life, other than like, my stepdad was a steel worker. My mom worked in admin in a hospital. I mean, like, so like, it was either that or that. And I was like, I'll take that because it looks better than where I came from.
And Benny, this is when I talk about like in relationships, the self-focus and the other focus, and like a visionary and integrator, right? Visionary gets hooked on that fantasy. And what happens is you want to mow everybody down, whoever is standing in your way of getting to that goal, right?
Well, I did. That did not serve me for a long while. And I tell people now, this is why it's so important to be who you are. Like, you can't just be like Grant Cardone, because Grant Cardone's being Grant Cardone. Like, Grant Cardone knows who he is, and he does it really well.
Yeah.
Well, I can't beat Grant Cardone. Trying to be like Grant Cardone for 10 years did not serve me well.
How did that narcissistic fantasy get built and then start to fall apart? How did you know it started to not work?
I mean, I got a little cocky. I tried to tell my car sales managers, like I knew better than them. I'm like 22 years old. These guys were 50, 60 years old school guys. I got fired from every car dealership I ever had. Went into. I'd work there for 6 months. I'd kill it. I'd sell a bunch. I'd make a bunch of money, and then I would like not go to work anymore. I would go party. I would go hang out. I'd try to impress girls with the money. I ran up credit card debt because they all said you need to get in debt to be successful. You need to be in debt to be successful.
Actually, man, you have got complete driven. And so the driven false identity, this narcissism, and we are biologically prone to narcissism, especially in our 20s. You couldn't pay me to be in my 20s again. There weren't refrigerators 10,000 years ago. And so what we do is we go hunt, kill it, enjoy and then eventually all of the stuff that we have to eat goes away and we get hungry again. And so you see this pattern, just classic pattern of success, and then you screw off for long enough to get hungry. And then then you get scared again and you launch back into this. How did that fall apart?
I remember I filed for bankruptcy when I was in my early 20s. I went and got a job because I wanted to go get a safe job because I basically thought I was a failure. I thought I was no good salesman. I thought, no way I'm going to ever have a successful career in the car business. went to go work for GE Money, and I was doing credit card collection over the phone because it was a stable job. And my mom was like, "Oh, look, you got a real job. You know what I mean? You're working for GE. You're on the phone." I was making like $12 an hour. It was fun though, the rush of like collecting credit card debt, being on a leaderboard. It was kind of boring after a while. Then I saw a home loan job come up in the same company, and I started doing home loans where they basically just program me on an auto dialer to like do these interest-only balloon payment, crazy California loans back before the crisis. I was part of the reason that, I feel like, the whole mortgage business, but I didn't know. I was like a 24 or 25-year-old kid. And like, I was just reading scripts off of a screen, like on a computer, just like today. And so that got shut down. So I didn't have a job there because they basically knew what was coming. Then I went to work for Verizon Wireless, and I'm all cubicle selling Blackberries and stuff like that. And I got bored with that after 3 months. And then I found cocaine.
Ooh.
And got drunk one night at a party. Somebody said, "Hey, try this." And I was always afraid to try drugs because, I grew up very Baptist, very strict. I was like, "Oh, I'm not doing drugs. Drugs are bad." I was part of the DARE program, growing up. And did that. And I was like, whoa, for the first time in my life, I actually felt still.
Yeah.
Like it does the backwards effect to me that it does to like regular people, I think. Like it speeds other people up. It slowed me down. I was like, whoa. Like everything else like stopped around me. And I was like, this is the best, like kind of like you said, this is like the best feeling ever. I want more of that. And then I started, again, the promoter in me said, I started telling people about this feeling. I was like, this is the best feeling ever. I said, I can't believe I said, do you want some? Do you want some? Next thing you know, I start to sell drugs. I start to feel acceptance in that community. I realized I started watching movies like Scarface and Blow. And I was like, oh, that's going to be me. I'm going to be Pablo Escobar. I literally was demented.
Familiar, my friend.
Yeah.
I got that Boy Scout badge, man.
Yeah. And then, I was bad at it though. I was not a good drug dealer. I was bad with the money. Money would come and go. I got evicted from my apartment. I was homeless for 3 days because I was too proud to go ask my mom for help. I remember getting pistol whipped. I got robbed at gunpoint, got my car stolen. I should have been dead. I literally talked the guy out of killing me when I was 28. And you would think that would be enough to wake me up and say, all right, let's try something different. But man, I was deep, man. And so I went back into it. About a year later, it all came to an end. Somebody, one of my supposed friends got in trouble for DUI and then set me up. And then the cops raided my apartment. And greatest thing that ever happened to me, one of the greatest things that ever happened to me. But then, there was that face-to-face moment with mom and dad, hey, son, isn't it time just to go get a real job? Isn't it time just to conform and get back in the box? And oh, that was a tough time. And I was just worried that I was going to have to go to jail. Luckily, because I never had a record and because I was, I had a good family and I went back to church and got involved and I was spared from going to jail. I got probation. The 2 felonies were on my account. So again, didn't think I could get a job anywhere. So, but then my uncle called me up and said, "Hey, come to Pittsburgh and help me sell roofs and for my new commercial roofing company." He'd been working for 20 years for someone else. He started his own small business, and for the first time, there was somebody that believed in me.
Oh, there it is.
And I felt really good, and I was off to another adventure. And so I picked up and moved. And my mom, guess what my mom told me? She goes, "What if he can't make the paycheck? What if he can't pay you on Friday?" I said, "Mom, I'm making $9 an hour asking for blood donations at this telemarketing thing with a bunch of people that are in the same situation that I'm in." I said, "That's not where I want to be for the rest of my life. I would literally rather die. Would rather die."
The guy's name who pitched the roofing to you. Who was he?
My uncle.
Uncle, mom's dad?
Yeah, my mom's brother.
And when he believed in you, how did you know? What did he say? How did you know he believed in you or saw you?
Well, he either believed in me or I felt like you know what? I sold myself that he believed in me. Maybe he just needed somebody cheap to come over and work because there was an opportunity when he was starting a business. He believed in me. Because he knew that I was a good kid. He knew that I had good skills. He knew that I meant well. I had a good family. He knew all that stuff. I think he wanted to shepherd me, which he did, and I think, he paid off so I had a bunch of fines with the court. I owed my uncle when I moved to Pittsburgh in 2000. This is in 2010, Dr. Doug. This was not that long ago, 14 years ago. I moved to Pittsburgh. I didn't know one single person other than him. I owed him $1,200. I think I had a credit score of 510. And then I started learning small business. And then I started seeing what small business looked like. There was a lot of good things that I learned. There's also a lot of things that were very clanky. He didn't want me to use technology. He grew up on a farm. using any technology. He didn't want me to, he said that he wanted me to do marketing, but every time I came up with a new idea on how to market, especially using social media, which was new back then, no, we're not going to do that. That'll never work. We'll never be able to sell a roof off Facebook. I mean, like all these ideas that I would have that I'd go back to him and he'd shoot them down, shoot them down. It was very like demoralizing. Like it was
that risk adverse. He was just risk adverse. What worked last year is going to work this year. That's farmers. I don't want to change. And
yeah.
That need to change, and he wouldn't buy it. No.
For all credit, he has a successful company. He started out making $6 an hour right out of college, trying to support his wife as a laborer in roofing. Got an excellent roofing business, and by his stretch, by his state of, acceptance and whatever his measures are. But I just saw that there was a different way to do things, right? I'm 20 years younger. I'm familiar with the internet. I'm familiar with technology. I can see where things are headed, right? That visionary in me, like I can see like, man, like there's so much opportunity. And he's like this awesome roofer who's been doing things like, the 2X way. But I saw this 10X path. I'm like, listen, there's no one in Pittsburgh. They're all doing it this old school way. It's all dudes doing chuck in a truck, old school stuff. There's no one that's marketing the roofing businesses. Like no one's like making it sexy. Like no one's making it cool. Like let's make it fun. Let's make it awesome. Let's not hide. Let's like show up. Let's have integrity. And he had lots of integrity, but no one knew about it. I'm like, let's just shine a light on you. Let's see. Like, and so 5 years, man, I'm like back.
It seems so obvious to us.
Yeah.
Did you see this? And it's that entrepreneurial leap, as Gino would say. And you took it.
But I want to bookmark something.
All right, bookmark it.
Okay. Do you think your uncle was driven?
He's got some of the driven. He's definitely the most driven out of anybody else in my family. I can tell you that. He is the most successful person I've ever met. Up to that point, he was always my rich uncle, right? The guy that always like going on vacations, did all these things. I think that he had an edge and he had a competitive spirit, very competitive, right? Football player, competitive type of guy. He wanted to create a different life for himself. He grew up on a farm. They grew up very poor. And so by that stretch, I would say he just had pure, straight, brute workforce and like just a work ethic that like, and again, I was blessed with that work ethic. I came from that same line of hardworking farmers, like everyone in my family works hard. They actually look at me. I mean, I used to be called lazy because I would come up with ideas on how not to work and my whole family would call me lazy. I mean, I'll never forget.
It's remarkable how hard we work at not working.
Right.
Yeah. I remember my stepdad come up with this thing. He used to call me lazy bones. And like, it was funny. Like, we laughed about it. But deep down inside though, I'm like, dude, like, this wheel's going so fast. I don't think anybody has any, just because you don't see my hands moving, just because you don't see my hands with mud and dirt on them doesn't mean like I'm not trying to figure things out. And so eventually, this 2015, I had just got married. I had a 1-year-old kid. I just bought my first house. I was really proud of all those accomplishments, especially when making like 40 or 50 grand a year. Like I was like, whoa, I was able to do all that. And then he called me up and said, hey, I need you to hang out and manage this project. Well, meanwhile, I was getting ready to take my family on vacation. This is my first family vacation. I paid some money to throw in for a condo down in North Carolina, meeting some of my other in-laws family. Got the truck all packed up, the kids in it, the wife's in it, beach stuff's in it, ready to go. He's like, no, you got to stay back. And I go, oh, no. I said, I took my week's vacation. I put it in. Like, I'm not like, I said, I'm going. I mean, like, we're ready. Like, I'm not staying back. Like, he always stood back and always let the family go. Because again, he didn't have the systems in his business, right? To be able to create that space. And I saw that and I learned from that. I learned a lot of good things, bad things. And I learned how to just shift all the not so good things and figure out ways to do that. Because I wanted to have the business. I wanted to have the awesome family. I wanted to be there though with them though too. Like that was the difference. And so I said, I'm not going. He sent me a text message and said, I think you should go sell roofs for someone else. Oof. And there began the journey of my entrepreneurial spirit. While I was on vacation that week, I was definitely too afraid to tell my wife that I just gotten fired because that was our only income. So, but I schemed and plotted and I mapped out on backs of napkins and cards, anything I could find to write with. I created the Big Fish Contracting Company with brand in mind, right? Like, because I wanted something bigger than myself. I didn't want to just be my last name, roofing company, like all the rest of the guys. And so I came up with this really cool cartoon fish. You can kind of see it here. I put a hammer in his hand for the roofing company, but my podcast now is called the Big Fish Cares Podcast. So it's the same fish though. And back then, like everyone thought I was crazy. They're like, dude, you live in Pittsburgh. People are going to think you're selling boats. You're on Three Rivers. Like, they're going to think you're selling fish sandwiches. Like, I said, not when we become the #1 customer service residential roofing company in the area. That's when they're going to know what Big Fish is.
#1 customer service company in the area. So Dan Sullivan, 10X. I mean, you had that mindset. You got it.
Oh, I got it. We still got it. And like, we just got named Pittsburgh's fastest 50 growing company. So like, and now we have over 800 5-star Google reviews. I've been out of the day-to-day business for 2 years. There's a whole nother story from like 2 years into business that you're going to love. I had a drug overdose. Oh yeah. I was so good. Like not doing like for 5 years, I was great.
I'm laughing, but it is.
I know it's terrible.
It's remarkable how the monkey elephant, lowercase self, the saboteur in us is just so cunning and so good at it.
So good. And so the first year I was in business, it was all by myself, right? I had me and a crew. I was doing the sales, the marketing, the project management. I was doing the invoicing. Literally, the crew was actually hammering on the roof. Thank God I had them, or I would have really been strung out. And then also at the same time, pressures of being a dad, being a husband. Like I didn't know how to do any of this. Like all at the same time, this all just happens at once. I barely could take care of myself for 33 or 34 years, or however old I was at the time. And then I joined a country club because I made so much money in that first year. I was like, wow, I got to reinvest this. I need to get around people that are smarter, brighter, and that have more opportunity. I'll never forget when I was working for my uncle, we did a bid on the country club's roof. And I remember going there to estimate it. And I talked to the guy down there. I said, what does it cost to join a club like this? I never seen a place like this before. So, I mean, the golf course was perfect. There's all these rich cars in the parking lot. I was like, what does it cost? And I knew that he was going to say, it was like, not bad to me now, but back then he said it was $10,000. And I was like, oh man, I was like making 40 or 50. My uncle didn't pay me that much. So I was like, yeah, that's a cool dream, man. Yeah. All right, cool. I guess I'll just be like your hometown over here. But when I had that money, first thing I wanted to do was to go join that country club. And it wasn't for the golf. It wasn't for the pool. It wasn't for the parking lot. It was for the people that I could meet, because up until that point, my uncle was still the most successful person I'd ever met in my entire life. I wanted something different for my life. I wanted a different level of clientele, and I had these other dreams. So got there, played golf a little bit.
It's called humility. And I try to teach it, and humility, humble. You start to seek out people that do know, if you can actually accept that you don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was a sponge. I mean, I asked those guys so many questions, but you know what I found out about the old guys at the country club? The guys that are 20 years older than you, they want to give you information, because most of the guys I found, they almost treated me like their son, because like their own kids wouldn't come and ask them the questions.
We're working on a bunch of stuff, Rachel and I'm working with a guy, Brian. It's in driven elders that have made it to the top of the hill and kind of get past this, and they see young drivens, and it is just they want to mentor, they want to pour into us. And most of us reject it unless you've had the shit kicked out of you in your 20s and you figure out that I really don't know a lot. And if you can get to that place, God, it is so rich. The men that you met, any of them jump out?
Yeah, like Rich Bynum, he's a commercial real estate guy. His 5th generation, super successful family. I was just enamored with like what that would be like to grow up with generation after generation of like successful business people, to like have that to learn that emotional intelligence, to be able to learn how to speak to people, how to build wealth. Like he bugs me now more than I bug him, because I don't want to say advanced passive, but I don't go to the country club anymore for a couple of different reasons. Because it's like I got bored there actually. Like I actually got bored in that mastermind, because those guys, unfortunately, they keep doing the same thing over and over again.
You outgrew them, man.
I guess, but he calls me now. He's like, hey, let's go to lunch. Let's go to lunch. And I can see the twinkle in his eye when he talks to me. And I love it, because it's like, man, I want to be like that when I'm 60, 65 years old. Like I want to go find and mentor all these guys. And the reason I told you the story about the country club is because I did have a couple younger buddies, and one of them, they slipped me a Percocet on the golf course to help me with my back, help me with my swing. Next thing you know, I know what those felt like, because I took some of those back in my late 20s. I started taking them, and then it got awkward, because then instead of them just like throwing me one here or there, whatever, because no big deal, I like asked them, like, I was like, hey, I said, you got another, can I get a couple more? And then I got like, oh no, I can't be like this. This is like, this is not country club-esque. I'm a businessman, man. I can't be a druggie. So then I went online, found some pills online because, you know, I'm very determined to get whatever I want.
I am.
And in 2017, I snorted a line of what I thought was Oxycontin, and here it was fentanyl. And I dropped dead in my upstairs office room at home. My wife and kid were downstairs. My best friend was coming over to pick me up for fantasy football draft, and just at that right time, I must have dropped over. He came over, must have been a minute later. My wife sent him upstairs because, like, you know, I wasn't coming down. He saw me dead on the floor, called 911. I lived 4 minutes from the hospital. So this God paused in my moment. The fact that I lived 4 minutes from the hospital, I just bought a big house 4 minutes from the hospital in this nice little cul-de-sac community. I'm upstairs laying down on the floor. My buddy happens to walk in. My buddy wouldn't have walked in. My wife and kid would have been downstairs for hours. And that's the only reason I'm even here today. So because that like perfect like trisection of like close to the hospital, buddy walking in, boom, saved my life. 2 shots of Narcan in ICU for 3 days. I remember waking up. My mom and dad were in front of me. They drove over from Ohio. My wife at the time, I got divorced. That's another part of the story. I don't know if we got time for all this, Dr. Doug. And I just remember being hooked up to these machines and all the shame, the guilt, the sadness, the relief. I actually felt relief at the same time. They're like, oh my gosh, the front's over. Like I can actually tell someone I need help.
Yeah, exactly.
Because like who do you tell that you need help? You can't. Like, there's no one to tell.
So important to anyone in recovery. That's what I teach. You know, there's going to be part of you that always wants to go back and get that feeling one more time. There's another part of you, that soul part of you that has the potential to wake up and really feel, you know, trapped in sin. I mean, really trapped in that monkey elephant fleshly hell.
Yeah, like who do you tell? Like I can't go tell the people. I can't tell the people that work for me because they're gonna like be like, what do you know? I'm not working for a crackhead. They'll be like, out. I can't tell the people, you know, the old guys at the country club because they're gonna be like, you know, oh, just go handle it, dude. Like you're just go take care of yourself. You know, the old tough guy I love.
Shame and alone. It's just
my wife at the time, she was an attorney working at the courthouse. I mean, like I couldn't tell her because she wouldn't know what to do. And I didn't have anybody to tell. I got so desperate one time that I thought I was going to go, I wanted to go check myself into a rehab, but I was like, that's going to embarrass somebody. It's going to embarrass somebody. I almost thought about going to one of those methadone clinics in Pittsburgh, but then I was like, my face is on billboards. I can't walk into a place with all these drug addicts. I mean, like, somebody's going to recognize me. Like, it was bad. But I tell you what, it's again, just like every setback in your life, there's a comeback story. It took me a few years, and I cut back on the drugs, you know, but then what happens, I replaced it with gambling. I replaced it with drinking a little bit more. And I talked myself, well, at least this isn't going to kill me. But I mean, I gambled like I did drugs. Like I drank like I did drugs. Like, I mean, like it was literally like I would black out. I would spend tens of thousands of dollars. I would fly to Vegas. And like, I mean, it was just insane.
When did you recognize this compulsiveness? I like to call people
my whole life.
Addiction. No, but
my whole life I recognized this compulsiveness, but there was no stopping it.
Right. People like to call it addiction. I think it's, you know, the word is compulsiveness. And what compulsiveness means is regular human beings think about, let's say they see a drink and they think, oh, there's a drink. And then they check what they're feeling and then they take action. People that have compulsive disorders go to, you know, think action. And by the time they feel that shame and that guilt. So going back to your feelings is so much harder than processing your feeling, taking action, right? Because we're working, you know, way faster. But the way you're talking now, and if I would have talked to you in 2017, you would have said, oh, I just have a drug problem. And then you realize, oh, I also have, it's not an isolated drug problem. There's a bigger thing going on here. So that's what I'm asking. When was that moment?
I would say I played COVID. So when COVID came, that was a different kind of a pause. That wasn't an acute pause like the felony or the drug overdose or getting fired. You know, those are all acute, right? Like a sharp, quick pain. COVID was like this macro like pause. And I looked around and I was in my house, couldn't really go anywhere, couldn't go get my fixes like whenever I wanted to, right? Whatever that was, whether it was work, whether it was going out, hanging out at the country club, going to the bar, going on to Vegas. I mean, like all that got stopped, right? And I looked around and I was like, man, this is a miserable life that I live. I'm like, this is miserable. I'm like, probably should have never gotten married in the first place. We weren't really aligned. I didn't even know what alignment was. And I learned all this stuff through some business consulting and things like that. And so I started to make some decisions. I decided to get divorced. And again, most of it was probably my fault. I don't even know how anybody actually lives with me. God bless Brittany, who lives with me now. She's a godsend. We might have time in the part 2 of the podcast to talk about her, but she
We'll
when I
have
met,
her on and we'll do a podcast with her too. We'll do
okay.
one, I promise.
Yeah.
It would be very rich in helping you see that you're not that hard to live with. You really aren't, if you actually can do this impulsive management where, who's really in control of your life. And that is this moment of change that happened for me during COVID too. Interesting. Man, we've run so many parallels. Driven, it's not a shame on you. What are you doing? It's this moment of clarity.
Well,
It's like, wait a second. What am I doing? And you take a big picture step back and look at your whole life, finance, romance, and health. And it's like, what am I doing? Rather than listening to that impulse and compulsion coming from the elephant, it's literally waking up the soul, where your soul has the capacity to actually start to become more and more in the driver's seat. And that is truly what I think we're doing here on this planet. That awareness, our soul is the one who is actually the decider, is the one who chooses what to pay attention to. And, the monkey mind is going with the elephant and, either fighting the elephant or feeding the elephant, where the soul is able to step out and not do anything for a moment. And that transition period, so big changes in 2020, 2021, and 2022. What's different from then to now?
oh, everything. When I met, so after the divorce, I thought I was just going to live a bachelor life. So I met Brittany, who was this loving, awesome human being. She was into mindfulness, yoga, health, nutrition, all these things that I knew nothing about. And so I found that very intriguing. Plus, she was really good looking. And I was like, all right. But I told her everything. I gave her the skeleton speech. I told her everything about me, trying to push her away because I was like, there's no way you're good enough to have, like, you do not want me. I'm broken.
She was warned.
I told her everything.
I was that wife.
She came closer.
I was that wife. And sometimes I think back to it and I think, A, we have a part of drivenness in us, and B, there's something in us that we don't see the red flags. Like my husband told me everything and I was like, yeah, that's cool. And then thinking back, I'm like, that was a red flag.
Maybe you're colorblind. I don't know. So that was that. And then I wasn't really going into so at the time, a year before that, I had hired a business coach and he talked me into like, hey man, like you're wired a certain way. Like you need someone to help you with finances and operations. Like, you don't have that. And so he said, I need to hire a COO. So I went out and found this MBA COO, guy's 10 years older than me. We're going to call him John. That's actually his real name. He was awesome. He was what Gino Wickman would call the wrong person in the right seat. Because the culture started to deteriorate a little bit. I didn't even want to go talk to the guy anymore because like it was just not fun. So like during COVID, I was like happy to like stay at home, like, hang out with Brittany, like experience what bachelor life was like, trying to get my life back on track. Cause I was in activation mode, my top 34 strengths, activator is number 1. What was number 2? Futuristic competition ideation. So I'm like a true visionary's visionary.
Yeah.
And I didn't know anything about that though at the time. So Brittany had me start doing these personality assessments. And I was like, me and her were geeking out over these personality assessments because we would basically
that is that soul capacity for self-reflection. You're looking in at monkey elephant and not, just being curious and really starting to take ownership of this meat suit that we're in.
Yeah, that was fun. And then I got to a point where like, all right, it's time to go back to work. Now I need to go back to work, but I can't stand working at my own company anymore. And so I was in a peer group, sales managers training type thing on Zoom. And I was telling a bunch of other entrepreneurs like what my problem was. And one of the guys goes, you need to read the book Rocket Fuel. I go, I don't read books. He goes, you need to read the book Rocket Fuel. I want you to have it done by tomorrow and I want you to call me. And this guy's an older guy, probably in his 60s. His name is Jim Bush out of Michigan. And I go, all right, and the best part about it is we did this peer group, I always show up live. Well, there was a recording. This old guy, he actually watched the recording the next day and sent me an email like an old man would. And I'm like, if someone's going to do all that, I got to read it. So I read the book or listened to it. And by like chapter 3, I was just like, I said, does this guy know me? Like, is he like talking to me? Like who is this Gino Wickman guy? That was the high that I was looking for. Like, that was the best high. I'll never forget that high. That moment I read that book, I mean, I don't know, all the oxytocin and whatever else you want to call it. I don't know all the technical words. I'm not a doctor, but I felt hot. I mean, it was awesome. So I called Jim. I said, "Hey, Jim, how do I get me an implementer? How do I get me an integrator? Tell me more." He's like, "Call my guy." So he gave me his ELS coach, Ken Koistra, out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. I do a 90-minute call. I said, "All right, cool. I'm in, activation mode." I said, "We're going to save this relationship between me and John, because John's been here for 2 years, and we're going to make it work now that we have a system. We just didn't have a system. We didn't have a common language." And he's like, "Yeah, sounds great." So I talked John into it. I said, "John, this is how we're going to make this marriage work." I said, "I need you to be committed to this, because this is the way that I'm going." And we did, I think we only had like 12 or 13 people on my team. I needed one more person to make a leadership team, because like 2 of us, that wasn't going to work. That's like couples therapy. I needed a third person in that box. So I brought up some girl from the office, and we made a little leadership team. But by the second day, the vision building day 1, me and Ken decided that John had to go, because John wasn't playing ball. And then I was like scared to death, because at this point I didn't do my books for 2 years. Like, he did it all. And we had more money than I ever had before. And I was scared to death to like stop that trend, because like I knew what happens when I manage money. Like, it doesn't get accounted for. Like, yep. we just say, "Oh, we have a sales issue. I'll just go out and sell more. I'll go work harder to like make up for it."
Carrying that humility out is beautiful. And so John was trying to control things, and he just pridefully wanted to do it his way, and that is not our way. And so there was
yeah. That's exactly what happened. So I took the leap of faith, went on an integrator search. I went and hired a fractional integrator, and back then in 2021, I typed an integrator. Dude, there was nothing coming up. Like, nobody claimed that identity on LinkedIn. Now everybody's an integrator. Yeah. And so but I found a guy, he helped me. I hired an integrator. Long story short, I get to the summer of 2021, and I had an executive assistant. I had this integrator, CFO type guy that came to help me. He bought in 25% of my company. So because of the divorce, I realized how much my company was worth, which was not very much, because it was all me. But he needed a little bit more he needed equity if he was going to leave his like $200,000 a year CFO cushy job to like come and like be scrappy in the entrepreneurial world. So he wrote me a check. And a week after my executive assistant comes on board, I'm on that same golf course again. And I'm playing in this member tournament. And I remember like it was yesterday. I shanked the ball out of bounds. So I was sitting over by the green underneath this tree waiting for these guys to finish. My sister calls. She never calls me. Like, never calls me. She always texts. And I picked up the phone because these guys were still putting. So I just wanted to see what she said. And she said that David died. And David was my little brother, my half brother. My mom and stepdad had a child, 12, I lived with him for probably 7 years. And then I moved out and did my thing. But he was like 12 years younger than me, and he died. He was murdered, shot in the back of the head, and a little drug deal gone bad. And I was like, man, just when I thought everything was great in my life, I got this leadership team, business is going good, I'm on the golf course again, me and Brittany are thriving. And like this, out of nowhere, another freaking, what I call God pause happens. I just couldn't believe it. And, it was like, this was 2021 and my overdose was in 17. So 4 years ago, my mom basically almost lost me. And I'm like, man, my mother is going to be like, just like, I don't even know what to do. I don't even know. Because I remember, I had a son, and I was just like, I can't even imagine what that would be.
I don't entertain those thoughts either.
And so I took that, I had a 3-hour drive over, and I knew that I had to like be in the gap, and I had to stand in for my family. I knew I had to stand in there because like I'm the one that can handle the pain. I've been through all the pain. I'm experienced with it. I figured out like, there's always something good that can come out of something bad. And I know this is really bad, but I pictured myself. I manifested the ability to be able to forgive that killer. I didn't know who that killer was. I had no idea who this person was. I manifested forgiving that killer because I know of people that have had similar stories. They hold on to this resentment and it just eats their life away. And I knew that there's more purpose. There's a reason I'm on earth and he's not. How do I figure out how to bring meaning to that? And so I like talked myself through this for like this 2.5 hour car ride. And I was able to spend 3 weeks in Ohio with my family. I never left. I like stayed in Canton, Ohio for 3 weeks. My business, I have a fresh integrator, fresh executive assistant. I don't know what they did, but like they held it together. And that's when I knew ELS was like the real deal. I was like, thank God. Because if I wouldn't have put ELS in my business 6 months prior to that, I wouldn't have been able to hold space for my family. I would have been able to go over there for like a day or two, and I would have had to come back to hold it all together.
That client.
So I was able to speed up the healing process for myself like so much that like I didn't get stuck in that depression. I didn't go back to the bottle. I didn't go back to the drugs. Like I didn't, because everyone in my life was like so surprised that I wasn't like out like binging or something. Like because everyone was waiting for me to like self-destruct.
And I'm gonna have you back, and we're gonna do nothing but talk about God and spirituality, because this thread that you keep mentioning and winding itself through, but there's an old saying that pain will continue through a family system until somebody's ready to feel it.
Takes 5 generations to create dysfunction and 5 generations to heal, right?
Yeah, but this ability for you to be that anchor, I'll give a teaser to that. What's your concept of God? What is it?
God's the creator of the universe. God's the creator of everything. I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. So I believe God sent Jesus to this earth to die for our sins. I believe that, he's perfect. I believe that, I don't even know if it's a he necessarily. I think it's not a he. It's like I just say he, just like he in like the big picture type thing. But God is everything. God wants us to be free. God wants us to choose and have that he wants us to make our own decisions because he knows that there's consequences, and he wants us to love him. And he wants us, but he also knows that we're going to do it our way. Like we want to do it our way. Because again, there's like this balance. But I think as soon as we realize that we need to submit and be that representation for him. And I did a poor job most of my life, and I probably still don't do the best job, but I hopefully that my life is a testimony of what's possible, to see like that there is like in pain, that there is like promise and there's hope. And just like in good things, right? Like there could be a lot of good happening in your life right now, but there could be an inverse effect on that as well. And I think that we just need to experience both for what they are, not get too high, not get too low, but just like basically open up the curtain and just feel it. Like everything, gratitude, pain.
And this will go up on YouTube, and that opening up is, you literally are opening up your heart to the world, and that beautiful, and what a driven story. How old are you now?
42.
Yeah, you're just starting. This is you are.
Oh, and I
you
got
are. What are we wrap
more,
this up? We're gonna go long, man. But it's. I'm gonna have you back like
all
soon.
right. Because I got two more little goodies for you.
All right.
So Brittany, my current partner and wife, she had child traumas as a young girl. Suffers with PTSD, and so because of EOS, I was able to spend a lot of time with her, lots of therapy. I read a book called The Body Keeps the Score.
Yep.
I was able to empathize in a way that I've never had. I was able to gather more feminine energy. I would love to talk to you a little bit more about that. We had a home birth with a baby about 18 months ago, Evie Grace, named her middle name Grace because we all need a little bit more grace in our life. After the last EOS conference in 2022, I came back home and 2023, she told me she's pregnant again. We're going to do the same thing, home birth, everything. September 3rd, she shrieks at the top of her lungs. I remember at that moment, I was upstairs, she was downstairs. I knew that baby wasn't going to make it. Oh, I knew that I was getting ready to embrace that pain again. We went to the hospital. Long story short, obviously she had the baby, but the baby didn't make it. I was able to hold space for her in real time now. Like this is like, I'm doing it in real time. Like I'm just able to be there. And like, I can already like feel the good and the bad all at the same time. That 30 days later, she goes to a meditation retreat in Krippala, this place up in Massachusetts. She goes to the grief guru counselor guy, comes back home. All of her triggers are gone. This girl had triggers like once a week, twice a week. You know what I mean? Sometimes like really like they were tens, right? Not sixes, like tens. Her triggers are gone. She's never like they're gone. Like that baby that's not here anymore. Her name is Ellie Hope. That baby healed her.
Yeah.
Like healed her. Like I can't even explain to you. And like, so that's what my keynote. So I'm going to be the opening keynote speaker at the EOS conference coming up in a couple of weeks. I don't know when this is going to air, but
Probably after.
I actually have my rehearsal today with the EOS people, but that's in my story. So my overdose, my brother's death, the story of Ellie Hope, it's all in my keynote. I wrote so much content about it. I feel like I should just write the book. But I'm not a book guy, man.
Yeah, not yet.
We all have a story to tell, but
No, and that's part of it. That's my fifth point. We all have a story to tell. What's your story? And that's why I have a podcast. I'm sure that's why you have a podcast, Dr. Doug. I really appreciate Rachel inviting me on here.
Oh, you are coming back. You are in my world now, and it's but the spiritual transformation you've gone through, mind, body, monkey, elephant, observer, mind, body, soul, however you want to do this, but it's you are very soul identified now. The capital S self is, and we'll go deep on that on the next one, because it is the soul, the little slice of God that we all are. When it embodies, God can't be around sin. God can't be around all the trauma recorded in our body. But it's that slow integration of God's love into our bodies that allow us to completely change our relationship with pain. Pain is love, and if you cut yourself, it hurts because you love life. If you lose somebody, it hurts because you love them. And the depth of your hell is the height of your heaven. And we'll go deep on that. So that's a teaser for where we'll go next. But I'll make you cry, I promise.
2 weeks ago, I was at the Visionary Summit, and I met your friend Brian Slusser.
Oh, yeah.
Never met him before. I texted him today and I said, hey, I'm going to be going on Dr. Doug's podcast. He's like, I'm just talking to Dr. Doug like right now.
Yeah, it's
so I want to know, like, the universe is aligning, like these connections.
No, and where we'll go, because you're a man of the word, you're a biblical guy. About 1 out of 12 people are driven. We're Peter.
I like that.
We are Peter, putting our foot in our mouth all the time.
You got to translate it for the Jewish girl here, because I have no idea what that is.
But we are making promises from our soul that our flesh can't keep. Oh, I got you. Yes. But our flesh can't do it. And until we are broken in that way, that realization that my soul has so much more potential than my flesh will, that awareness that I got to let the soul be in the driver's seat is you are just a perfect manifestation of that. And you're honest about the struggle of it. But you remember, so on the day of Christ's ascension, Pentecost, 50 days, Christ was the last one to talk to Peter. And he said, do you agape me? Do you love me in a godly way? And agape doesn't mean that I'm willing to die for you, often interpreted that. It's non-directional. So it's my willingness to let you die for me. What you said about Anna Gray or Anna Hope, she died for that freedom and letting it, as from a parent level, would you let your kid die from you? Oh, hell no. But that's our flesh talking, not our spirit. And when Christ said that to him, and Peter answered correctly, man, I don't know how. I don't know. I love you like a brother, but man, and I'm sure he's crying. And Christ said, good answer. Then he said, care for my sheep, tend to my sheep. And he asked him 3 times. And on the 3rd time, he says, you are the rock that I'll build the church on. And I believe that's Drivens. I believe that's us. And I think we're the manifestation of the next church. So it's a really, Drivens are really important to this world, man. But this message about God and the battle between flesh and spirit and all of that, we understand it in such a profound way. And remember, we're the ones who got out of the boat.
We go first.
11 are in the back of the boat hiding. Christ comes walking and we're like, I'll get out of the boat. And it's like, whoa. But that's us. And so, yeah, we'll go deep on that one. So that's a tip for the next one.
I want to do like a quick 60-second riff wrap up thing because Benny, you were telling your story and there were certain things that I noticed and I want to point out to people just to bring it back home to the driven part. And I think bring it back home to you. There are different levels of drivenness, and I think your uncle was a certain type of driven. And Dr. Doug, what I'm realizing is there's the millennial driven and there is like, I don't know what you want to call it, you know, baby boomer driven, and it's a different type of driven. And I see that similarity between me and you. Like I judged my father with his business. I was like, oh, you're, but when I look back, I'm like, he is driven just in his way. And then we're driven in our way. And that's why as drivens, we don't want anybody telling us what to do. We want freedom and winning, right? And that's when you want to do it your way. But what I've learned through my recovery is to look at my parents and accept them for who they were in their generation. 1990s, there was no self-help. Like self-help is so available to us. And when we look at our parents, we want them to treat us like whatever's available today. But really, they did the best what they had then. So, you know, like there is that gap that I see because I don't think we've had that many young people on this podcast. And that story of the driven, of how we judge people that are older and driven, and we think, oh, they're not driven. But really, they're driven for their generation. We're driven for our generation. So that was something interesting to point out, which I think is important for people to hear. Yeah, so that's my take on this.
This is awesome. Yeah. Well, Benny, it's been fantastic, and this is just the beginning, I promise.
Well, listen, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, when I listened to your podcast with Gino, and I thought that was really well done too. I was like, man, I was excited for today. I'm excited. I was excited for this opportunity. I mean, I'm on a lot of podcasts, but none with so many people, like someone like you that's doing like really meaningful work.
I appreciate that.
I can't. It's hard for me to explain in the words. But I feel what you're doing. Like I know what you're doing. I feel like I know what you're up to.
Wait, so we beat Garvey? What?
Gary V? Oh yeah. Well, no, he's an amazing person.
I'm joking.
But this was awesome, man. I'm looking at you, and you live in where? Tennessee?
I'm in Gallatin, Tennessee, just north of Nashville.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to come down to Nashville with my team, and
I will take you bow fishing if you've
never. Have to get you on my podcast.
Yeah,
I'd love you to have Dr. Doug on your podcast. That would be awesome.
We only do in person, so you're either gonna have to come to Pittsburgh or I'm gonna have to come down to Nashville.
Got some people up in Pittsburgh. I'd love to come up. That'd be fantastic.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Benny.